Well, it's that time of year again, Halloween. A time for ghosts and goblins, and for kids everywhere, both old and young, to enjoy the spookier things in life. And I happen to be standing in the one place in this world that proudly considers itself the Halloween capital of the world, Anoka, Minnesota. But how did it become so? How did Anoka, Minnesota come to be the Halloween capital of the world? Where do we even get Halloween anyway? And how did we come to celebrate it in America?
The story of Halloween begins in Europe hundreds of years ago, among the Celtic-speaking countries of the British Isles. These cultures celebrated at the time of year a harvest event that marked the beginning of the darker half of the year, the winter. Those early traditions stated that it was the time of year when the spirits could more easily access the earthly world and were thought to be more active. Some believed that these spirits were to be feared and appeased, so offerings were made and places were set at the table for them in the belief that the dead would return home for that one night of the year. By the early 18th century, some traditions included imitating the spirits and dressing up in costume and mimicking the pranks of the spirits. As often happens, cultures merge through trade, through conquest, and through contact. The Catholic cultures of Western and Southern Europe brought their own influence to the holiday and helped give it its name. All Saints' Day occurs on November 1st, and the holiday was started by the Church in the year 609. It was celebrated in the spring, but Pope Gregory IV moved it to November in the year 835. With All Saints' Day established, the day before it became known as the Hallowed Evening, or All Hallows' Eve. Non-Catholic Christian faiths rejected the holiday and often saw them as against the teachings of the Christian faith. This divide carried over in the United States. Early Catholic colonists in Maryland and the Anglicans in the South Atlantic colonies celebrated the holiday, but the Puritans of New England remained opposed. Catholic immigrants fortified the holiday in the mid-19th century, and by that first decade of the 20th century, the holiday was becoming more mainstream and celebrated by many.
Allison is my friend. We met in school when we were younger and grew up together. We did everything together. Then one day something happened, and people started to tease her, being really mean. At first she would pretend it was no big deal, that it didn't hurt her. But after a while it started to get to her. Her grades started to slip, and she used to be such an awesome student. Then she stopped talking to everyone, even me. Now she's not around anymore, and I miss her so much. Allison was my friend.
Really? Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
And here we are, hundreds of years later, still celebrating this pagan tradition. But these days, Halloween is more about fun, interaction in the community, and a good scare rather than trying to appease the harvest spirits. But that still leaves the question of Anoka. Exactly what makes it the Halloween capital of the world, no less?
Anoka, Minnesota is a small town on the confluence of the Rum and Mississippi rivers, about 25 miles northwest of Minneapolis, Minnesota. The community has a rich history of milling and is a commercial center for the surrounding agricultural community. Yet what it is perhaps most known for, across the state and beyond, is its claim as the Halloween capital of the world. So how does a small suburban community in the 21st century lay claim to such a lofty title? Though it had been celebrating Halloween as a community-wide event since 1920, Anoka didn't have the title of Halloween capital of the world until 1937. Thanks to the efforts of Harold Blair, one of Anoka's many proud citizens, that title came into being. The Halloween celebration saw a threat to Anoka's unofficial domination of the civic celebrations of the holiday. Minneapolis, about 20 miles southeast of Anoka, just down the Mississippi River, planned its own civic celebration in 1936 and began to bill itself as the nation's center of Halloween. Apparently, Anokans took the threat seriously and decided to go over the heads of their larger neighbor. The 12-year-old Harold Blair was a newspaper carrier for the old Minneapolis Journal and a good salesman to boot. In fact, he won a sales contest from among the 200 other carriers and was awarded with a trip to Washington, D.C. Blair left for Washington with a couple of items in tow. He was given a yellow sweater to wear with a patch on it representing the Anoka Halloween celebration. The sweater had been provided and even designed by the community. Blair's prize trip had been turned into something of a diplomatic mission to award Anoka a title worthy of its Halloween celebration, because in addition to the sweater, he carried with him a proclamation declaring Anoka the Halloween capital of the world. Not satisfied just to usurp Minneapolis's machinations to take over the nation in Halloween celebrations, Anoka wisely included world in its new title, no doubt warding off countless other contenders to the throne across the world's oceans. Newspapers reporting on Blair's trip remarked on his attending a Washington luncheon held in his honor attended by congressmen. From this point on, Anoka held the title of the world's Halloween capital, though challengers to the title have come forward. In 2007, Anoka was challenged by Salem, Massachusetts, and Hell, Michigan. Fox and Friends, a national morning show co-hosted by Anoka-born Gretchen Carlson, held a debate over which community should have the title. Representatives from all three communities were given 30 seconds to state their cases before turning it over to the viewing audience to decide. Bart Ward, that year's chair of the Anoka Halloween Committee, represented Anoka's interests. His words may have been aided by the fact that Carlson wore an official Anoka Halloween sweatshirt during the broadcast. Regardless, after the vote took place, Anoka won and retained its title.
I wanted to come here and apologize, even though I know it won't change anything. All I think about are the lives I've affected. I replay the moment every day. The way your mom looked at me after I took your life. I knew better than to text and drive, or so I thought. I thought since I was close to home and no other cars were around, I was safe. I work hard, get good grades. I thought I was a good person. Now I can't even look at myself. I didn't think this would happen to me. My selfishness destroyed your family. If I had just waited until I got home to use my phone, we'd both have a future.
It's time to go.
Offering live event coverage via our website and on-demand streaming of regular programs.
We collaborate with local organizations for important community conversations.
Most importantly, QCTV tells the stories that matter to the people who live, work, and play in the communities of Andover, Anoka, Champlin, and Ramsey.
And so the title was secured. Anokans could rest easy in the knowledge that Anoka was, once and for all, the Halloween capital of the world. Eventually, the spirit of the event would spill over into other areas of the community, including football.
As we've seen, all the community wanted to get in on the Halloween fun. In 1948, Anoka High School's football team, the Tornadoes, were scheduled in a gridiron match against Robbinsdale on Halloween night. The Halloween committee decided to try an experiment and name the game as an official Anoka Halloween activity. The Anoka 11 shut out Robbinsdale and won 12-0. The game was a great success, and a new Halloween tradition was born. Minneapolis Tribune columnist Barbara Flanagan dubbed the game the Pumpkin Bowl, and the name has carried on ever since. Some argue that the game holds the distinction of being the first high school bowl game in the entire country. In the early years of the game, Anoka High School invited a school to come and play in the game. And when schedules for playoff formats made this more difficult, it was decided that the last home game of the season would be declared the Pumpkin Bowl. The second Pumpkin Bowl included an event that had nothing to do with football, but would play a small part in a dramatic change in the care and treatment of the mentally ill in the state. Governor Luther Youngdahl attended the game in 1949 and came onto the field to greet the crowd at halftime. After the public appearance, he left the stadium and drove up 4th Avenue to the grounds of the Anoka State Hospital. The Pumpkin Bowl appearance was simply a precursor to his announcement that evening. Before a gathered crowd of 1,000, Youngdahl, dubbed the Godly Governor, announced that the Anoka State Hospital, home to 1,339 patients suffering from a range of psychiatric and mental conditions, would no longer be bound in straitjackets and restraints. After his remarks, Youngdahl was handed a torch and set ablaze a pile of hundreds of leather restraints and canvas straitjackets. It was a new era in the care of the mentally ill, and the Pumpkin Bowl and Anoka's Halloween celebration had become a large enough attraction to host the statewide announcement. Starting in 1950, the team that won the Pumpkin Bowl was awarded a trophy that traveled with the game winner for the year. Now, over the years, it has spent more time in the Anoka High School's trophy case than it has away from home. The Anoka County Historical Society has the game ball for the 1952 game in its collection. Its journey to the Anoka County History Center started with some good old-fashioned high school hijinks and then detoured over 60 years. The 1952 team had a strong season and capped off the regular season with a Pumpkin Bowl victory over Little Falls, one of the best teams in the state. The 1953 Anoka High School Annual describes that previous fall's football team as follows. In all these games, the last two in particular, which included the Pumpkin Bowl victory, Anoka displayed a brand of teamwork and a spirit which made it difficult to pick any star performers except for the team as a whole. These victories, coupled with Anoka's Suburban Conference showing, definitely marked the Tornadoes as one of the state's top teams. As the final whistle blew on that 1952 Pumpkin Bowl, a plan that had more moving parts and participants than the actual game might have had sprang into action. Bert Webster, the center of the team, grabbed the game ball and threw an on-target pass to his friend Bob Dickman, a classmate sitting in the stands. Before anyone could act to retrieve the ball, Dickman turned and threw the ball over the fence and into the waiting hands of another classmate, Dennis Ward. Ward then carried the ball into the waiting car of Larry Washburn, and the two drove off with the ball. Whether or not the coach even knew the ball had gone missing, we'll never know. But if he had seen it, he may have been impressed by the play and execution of the larceny. The ball spent the next 61 years in neighborhood games of touch football. It stayed with Ward, who kept it at his Champlin home as an adult and let his kids play with it, and then it came back to Anoka when he moved into a home on Van Buren Street across from the house he grew up in Anoka. At one point, it was tossed into a box and forgotten about, only to be rediscovered by Ward as he packed up to move out of that home on Van Buren. He decided to donate the ball and its great story to the Anoka County Historical Society in 2013.
Hey, I'm just leaving now. Can you text me the details? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Chef Marshall O'Brien. I'd like to tell you about foods that reduce inflammation. Different health needs require different food strategies. Chronic inflammation can occur over time when we have a diet that puts stress on the body, so having a nourishment strategy is essential. The following foods are your friend, so incorporate them into your diet to reduce inflammation. Foods high in omega-3 fatty acids, like salmon, tuna, sardines. Herbs and spices, including turmeric, garlic, ginger, colorful vegetables and fruits like dark leafy greens, blueberries, spinach. All of these foods are anti-inflammatory foods which will help your body be more pain-free. These foods are not your friend. Added sugar, which actually feeds inflammation, bad fats, and preservatives like excess salt. Try to minimize or eliminate these from your diet. These ingredients are commonly found in most foods like fast food and packaged foods. Remember, what you eat affects how you feel and how you perform.
To learn more, visit chefmarshallobrien.com. Even then, Halloween had a way of seeping into the community, even its football. Well, recently a local woman decided to figure out how that came about. Anoka resident Roxy Orcutt recently released a book, History and Hauntings of the Halloween Capital, a book about the history of Halloween in Anoka.
There's so many stories that go along with the history of Halloween in Anoka. People will just flat out ask me, well, why is Anoka the Halloween capital? And I'm like, there's no simple answer. There's no simple answer. And there's just so much that goes into the answer. And that's why the book is there, so you can read all about it and learn. And it's a great story. It's a fun story. It's very much a, grassroots sort of campaign to make Anoka the Halloween capital. And that's what I love about it. People get to find out.
Roxy Orcutt is an Anoka native with a passion for two things, Halloween and Anoka. For the past 2.5 years, she's run a blog, The Halloween Honey, that's all about the paranormal, haunted places, and other spooky stuff. Recently, she combined her love for Halloween with her love for local history and wrote the book, History and Hauntings of the Halloween Capital.
I didn't grow up in Anoka, but I have family here. My mother has worked in this town for nearly 30 years, and I have family that's lived here my entire life. I'm 31 years old, so they've been here the whole time. So we've always had Halloween in Anoka. We've always gone to the parades. We've always been involved. My mother actually for a time worked for the committee. She did some bookkeeping stuff for them. But that's always been a part of my childhood. We loved Halloween. We always went out trick-or-treating. We made a big deal of it at my house. And it was so great because the Anoka Halloween celebrations were always the weekend before actual Halloween. So we could come into town because I grew up in Oak Grove, which is about 20 miles north of here, and it was very rural at the time. Now it's not so much, but it was at the time. So we would come into town for a big Halloween celebration with all the other kids, and then we could go back to our neighborhood and trick-or-treat around our neighborhood. So Halloween was better than Christmas for us. We celebrated it more than Christmas. It was more fun, less pressure. So that was always sort of something we did, and I never missed a Halloween in Anoka, even when I was like, 13, 14, 15 and too cool for everything. I'm like, Halloween in Anoka, I'm not going to miss that. So we always came to the parades. It was always such a big deal. We have a potluck. We still do to this day. We have a potluck. We treat it like a holiday for my family. It's very important to us. So when I had my stepson was 6 years old when I got married to his father, my husband. So that was like, I'm going to get this kid into it. So he's now 14, so he's also been indoctrinated to this Anoka Halloween thing. And then I have a daughter who's 4. So it's so much fun to bring other, the next generation into it. And that's sort of how I started writing the book, was once my daughter was born in 2010, I was a stay-at-home mom. And I needed, how you're staying at home and you need an outlet because you're with a baby all day and you're so focused on the baby. So what I started to do is I started a blog called The Halloween Honey. And it was just a blog that I started in 2012 when she was just about 2. And it was a lot of fun for me. I got to look for pictures about Halloween and just talk about subjects and the paranormal and ghost stories and all that fun stuff. But I always found myself writing these blogs about Anoka because I lived here now. I made Anoka my home because I wanted to live in the Halloween capital. What a cool place to live. So we moved here. We bought our house in 2009. Then my daughter was born in 2010. And then I started the blog in 2012. So it's been I found myself writing about Anoka, and I wanted to know more about the history. So of course, naturally, I assumed there'd have to be a book. some sort of book about the history of Halloween in Anoka. We were the Halloween capital. And you heard stories why, and you can go on the ghost tour through the Anoka County Historical Society, and they give you a brief rundown of why Anoka has this title. But I always thought there would be a book, some sort of book that existed. There was no such thing. So I thought to myself, well, this is silly. There should be one. And I'll just write it, because there isn't one.
And so Roxy's blog began to feed her ideas for the book, and she began to write it. Sounds easy enough, but soon she found out exactly how tough it could be.
So I started my blog and my book both in 2012, and they sort of grew together. It was actually quite helpful to have my blog because I was able to write about an idea I had, and then I could follow up with it later when I was writing the book. So what I did, I think it was about December of 2012, I really started going to the Historical Society, and they were so great. They have 2 giant files marked Halloween file, and it's just old newspaper clippings and pictures and just so much great history in these files, and it was so much fun to go through. It was great. Let me rewind, because I forgot to tell you, back in 2011, before I started my blog, I volunteered at the Historical Society as a docent for their Ghosts of Anoka tour. It wasn't for me because it was very much a performance, very much a theatrical, and I never really thought of it that way until someone told me it's a performance. And I thought, oh, no. I don't like to act, and I don't like to, I'm not that sort of person. But so I went on a couple of tours with a few of the other docents, and I watched them, and I'm like, they're so great. They're so good at what they do. But on the other hand, it was an amazing experience because I learned so much, and I learned so much of the ghost stories of the town. So it was very much that what I learned doing the tours, and then when I started my research in 2012, it was really helpful to mesh everything together. I only did the tours for that Halloween season till the end of October. And then I kind of bowed out. I'm like, this isn't for me, I'm good, thanks. But it was, the people who do them are so amazing, and they're so, these paranormal stories and these ghost stories are such historical enhancers. They make people more interested in the history, which to me is more interesting than anything, because I like to walk in Anoka and think to myself, people have been walking on this street for over 150 years. That's amazing. I'm walking where someone walked over 100 years ago. So what's so nice about the Historical Society is they're so organized. I've heard from all sorts of people, this is one of the best ones in the state. The state of Minnesota has so many historical societies, so many counties. The one we have here in Anoka is one of the best. So to do my research there was such a treat because I was, everyone was so welcoming and so helpful, and I was able to, will you make me a copy of this? Can I take this home with me? I bring it back, I promise. So it was that sort of thing. So I would gather all this information, and then I would come home and I would lay it all out on my kitchen table and just take notes, like handwritten notes. And then from there, I would write it on my laptop. So that was the process I did. I would say for about a year and a half I did that. And it was very much in March, I'm really into this. But like in April, I'm gonna take a break. So it was sort of like, that was my whole process, was I would go at it, and then I would kind of rest. And I submitted it for publication in, I want to say July of 2013, just sort of, I kind of finished most of what I wanted, and there was a couple publishers I had in mind, and I submitted it to a few, and I heard back from North Star Press of St. Cloud, and they were so excited about it, and that was the coolest thing. I started crying when I read the email. It was so exciting. What an accomplishment, my first book. So what was nice about it is they gave me a timeline to finish it, and then they also said, we want some great photographs. And I was able to enlist my friend Christy to help me take these pictures around the town, and she took some beautiful pictures that are in the book of these places I talk about, of what makes Anoka unique, like our rivers and our streets, and she just did a beautiful job. So the book is just a great combination of all the historical facts, these spooky stories, all this Halloween goodness, and you get to know why Anoka is the Halloween capital, mixed with these beautiful pictures. And it was such a reward to do, and I'm just so happy about it, and I love it so much. I'll just look at my book and go, oh, I love my book.
And so, with much fanfare, her book was released. And even though she's done with the writing, it still seems to be finding a way to keep her busy.
The book came out September 1st, which was Labor Day. And what's so nice about it, this whole summer I was able to do events around town like Riverfest, which is huge here in Anoka, and I took pre-orders. And my pre-orders were unbelievable. I couldn't believe how many people wanted this book as soon as they could get it. So I sent out maybe about 30 pre-orders, which is big for me, I think. And then, you know, I've had 2 events so far this past weekend at the Mad Hatter Tea Room and then over at Billy's here. It's just been, the reception's been unbelievable. People are so kind and so excited. And the great thing about it is I hear so many people, did you know this story? Have you heard this story? Did you know about this? And I can hear these tales and I'm like, no, I don't. This is amazing to hear you people talk about this. So that's what's been really fun, is meeting all these new people at these events. And I have so many lined up for the rest of September and October. It's just going to be insane. But it's just been so much fun. And I've sold so many books, which is amazing. And I've sent them all around the country so far, which to me is great. Like, I think Anoka is amazing. I love it here. I love this town. And I think the more people who know how unique we are and sort of, I'm not interested in sort of changing our perception, but I believe there's so much more to us than what people think. And if my book can help people come to Anoka, come experience the people who live here, the real people who live here, not just who they think lives here, and meet the wonderful people and see our historic buildings and enjoy a Halloween in Anoka, I think that's wonderful. And I'm so excited to be a part of it.
And so with the book written, naturally we were curious if there were any more on the way.
Oh man, hopefully sooner rather than later. Like I said, I've been hearing so many stories from people and I'm just like, tell me these so I can write them and I can find out the background so I can create a second book for the people of Anoka to enjoy and read about all our spooky little stories.
So we can look forward to it.
Yes, yeah, I'm working on something.
Well, thanks again.
Yeah.
Thus the tradition continues, from a sacred pagan practice in Europe from hundreds of years ago, to an official Anoka celebration since the 1930s, to the time-honored event we practice this very day. Halloween continues to be an important part of our history and our present. Thanks for watching It's Your History. From QCTV, I'm Matt Overstreet.